question, which is 2A, right? Can you see 2A? It's saying the price elasticity of supply for a new smartphone is estimated to be zero point 0.8. Now, guys, remember we did this paper May 2020. We were doing variant 3, which is a good variant. We did a data response just last time, which was mainly micro, but now is the time to look at CSS. Please stop me if you find some sound issue happening at any point in time, okay? Okay, guys. So let's start with the first one, 2A. 2A says this, that the price elastic supply for us new smartphones to be 0.8 in the short run and 1.5 in the long run. Explain PES, so we'll talk about that. What's PES? Then we talk about suggest why the above estimates differ, basically in the short run and long run. So we talk about that. So first thing first is basically the definition. There is sound. Yes, there is sound in the background, right? Is that what you're saying, Chocolate? There is a sound in the background because I am. Yes, please ignore the sound in the background, guys. So I am in a setting where there is quite a lot of sound. So please ignore that. The PES is for a new smartphone is estimated at 0.8 in the short run and 1.5 in the long run. So if you look at this, first we define PES. So we define PES. What is PES? PES simply percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. Isn't that true? It's the responsiveness of quantity supplied to a change in price, right? So guys, what does PES tells us? It tells us how our supply or change in price, right? And if you look at the value of the good, it's 0.8 versus 1.5. So we can then talk about this, that once we talk about the formula and once we talk about the definition, it measures the responsiveness of quantity supplied to change in price. And if the value of PES is less than 1, guys, what happens? If the value of PES is less than 1, it means it's inelastic, not so responsive to change in price. And if PES is greater than 1, it's responsive, which means that as the price goes up, quantity supply will go up by much more, right? Now, in the short run, we then talk about that. There will be no class today at 4. This is the class that is supposed to happen at 4. So if you are going to miss it, you will be given a recording of that. Okay, guys, the PES is example 0.8. We will talk about that. This is basically, this means the good is inelastic, right? In the short run, while in the long run, PES value is basically 1.5, which means it's elastic. Then comes the idea that why is it elastic or inelastic? Short run versus long. Yeah, guys, sorry. What are the factors, guys? Can somebody tell the factors that can make the good elastic or inelastic in terms of supply? Anyone? Spare capacity. Good job. So let's list down all the factors and then look at short-term versus long-term values. Spare capacity. Good job. Which is basically ability to store. Again, another one is ability to store. Number three, anyone else? Time duration. The longer the time period, the more easy for you to increase supply. Yes, and the factor mobility. Good job, guys. So, so these are the factors. Cost of production within the cost of. So look at this. So before you write all these factors, within the cost of production, the idea of spare capacity and factor mobility comes into play. Then ability store is the perishability idea. Somebody's calling out perishable or non-perishable, which is the perishability idea. Then comes the time period. So first thing first is that if a good is has a spare capacity, it's easier to increase supply easily. And in the long run, a firm can build spare capacity. That's why the supply can be more elastic in the long run. Secondly, abilities to store is perishable or non-perishable. The fact that smartphones are non-perishable, that explains why even in the short run the value is pretty high, not as high as in the long run, but at least the value is high. Then we talk about the idea that factor mobility, how easy to smooth factors from one to another, and the idea is just that in terms of mobile phones, we talk about this that it is a good that may not be easy to move factors from one piece to another because it is a technical more complicated code, requires more skills. So factor mobility might not be that high. However, the longer the time period, the easier or the longer the time period under consideration, the easier it is for producers to increase supply as they can vary the factor easily and build capacity, which this is why in the long run PDS is higher than the short run. So that's a discussion that you need to write in your answer. So it's a very good answer, a very good question. At least it tests our knowledge of these concepts. Is there any question before we move on? Anyone? Any problem with this? Yeah, easy, guys. Okay, awesome. Let's look at the second part of the question. The second part of the question says, discuss whether for a manufacturer of smartphone, knowledge of their products, price elasticity of demand, or its cross elastic demand with respect to the other products is more useful. Well, PED is always useful, guys. They compare PED with other factors. So first thing first, you need to definitely prepare the relevance of PED. And in fact, relevance of XED, YED, PED, PES, all of these relevance are important because they come a lot. So please make sure you are prepared with the relevance of it. Okay. So guys, first we define PED. Okay, so that's the outline of it. We define PED. We provide the formula, right? PED is the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price. We give the formula, which is PED is equal to percentage change in QD over percentage change in price, right? Then we give basically XCD, which is its formula and its definition. It's a responsiveness of demand to a change in price of another good, right? So FCD is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded of good A or percentage change in price of good B, right? And then we talk about this, guys, that XCD is useful for us to look at relationship between two words, right? So let's talk about the usefulness of PED and YD. PED, we saw it is relevant because we want to figure out the percentage change in quantity. If I know my PED, I can find out when the price change, how will my demand respond, number one. So it tells us the quantity produced. Number two, it helps us in revenue. Yeah, so I mean, honestly, price of other good could also be, you can say, demand or quantity demand doesn't really matter. Okay, so it helps us in figuring out the revenue, right? It helps in figuring out the pricing policy in short, because if you are selling elastic goods, you may need to raise your price. I'm sorry, you may need to decrease your price to increase revenue. Similarly, if you're selling inelastic goods, increase your price to increase revenue. Right? Any other thing that guys we will talk about here in the responsive in the relevance of PED? Anyone? It's a very good job. Incidence of tax. In a more inelastic the good, the higher the incidence of tax on the consumer. So consumer will pay more tax if the incidence, if the demand is elastic, if the demand is inelastic. In case of smartphones, when you are saying incidence of tariffs on imported phones, yeah. So I mean, I may want to, or maybe want to get an incidence, but basically this is good enough that from the consumer's perspective, the incidence of tax will be paid by them versus producers will be paying depending on elasticity. So that's a good sort of perspective. Now let's look at XCD. XCD tells us basically the relationship between two goods, whether the goods are substitutes versus complements, right? We talk about how if the value of XCD is positive, it's a substitute. If it's negative, it's a complement. So it tells us how the company's revenue will behave, demand will behave when the pricing changes. Also, if the good is a substitute price, the order complement, the value also matters. So if the XCD value is small or inelastic, be it positive or negative, the relationship between two parts versus the relationship is weak. So, for example, if the value of XCD is like a plus 0.2, it's a weak substitute versus a minus 0.2 will be a weak complement. But a plus 1.2 will be a strong substitute, and a minus 1.2 will be a weak. So, Shok is saying for XCD to be right, as in WRITE, if the XCD is greater than 0, then substitute. Yes, we need to talk about that. We should lower the price too. Okay, so no, so what you can then talk about is that, you know, like, so when you are looking at, when you look at XCD, XCD is a very good way to figure out how you would react to a competitor's move. So for example, when you have a very strong substitute, then you may be very responsive to change in price, and when you have a weak substitute. So for example, Coke and Pepsi, they have a stronger relationship with each other in terms of weak substitute, and therefore they will be basically reacting to each other's pricing or look at each other's marketing and other moves much more closely. Make sense? Does that make sense? Are you guys good? Makes sense. So that's a good question to look at. Okay, guys. Now evaluation is needed. So what is evaluation? So both of these XCD and XCD and PED is important. But if you look at PED versus XCD, PED's importance comes into play in terms of firms' own policies. Your pricing policy and is kind of definitely looking at your pricing policy and looking at your demand in the market. However, if you're looking at XCB tells us how your competitors, how will you react to your competitors' moves. So while BED is more important for your own price policy, XCB may shape your marketing strategy. XCB may shape also your pricing policy vis-a-vis your competitors. So both are very important when it comes to firm. Um, Sorry, price discrimination. Yeah, I mean, if it's even last, then price discrimination. Yes. However, don't get into price discrimination because price discrimination more of an equal topic than yes topic, honestly. Okay, guys, are we good? So conclusion that matters. So, so both are important. PED probably is more important when it comes to the demand for when you're looking at analyzing your demand. Now we didn't talk about. Yes, I just spoke about the state of the India road. We didn't really talk about smartphones. So my discussion about smartphones. Uh, uh, it has to be around smartphones. So for a manufacturer of smartphones, the knowledge of PED will be useful because that will help them understand, how much quantity will you produce. So while you're writing your answer, you need to talk about smartphones uh, in your discussion. But here we need to write analysis of incomes. Yes, we need to write. So that's what exactly. So can we write PEDs? What I mean, choosing PED is more relevant or XCDs. Exactly, we can talk about that. So in your eyes, PED is probably more important. But like when you're looking at, let's say, Apple smartphone, iPhone, and you're looking at Samsung market. So it may be pertinent to look at XCD for them because if you have a very close substitute, you may want to sort of also look at their move very closely as well. So, I mean, honestly speaking, you can talk about PED and XCD, both are important. So you don't need to per se say one is more important because this is a smartphone market, but you can also justify it. Okay? Like for a new firm, or for established player, what do you feel would be more important? For established player, maybe who has already a very strong market, um, they may want to sort of look at their demand elasticity more closely because that's help them to know how the market is moving. Got it? Okay. Now let me move on to the next question. Um, the annual rate of inflation in the economy increased sharply and unexpectedly. Explain the likely consequence um, of such an increase for consumers and firms. So if the annual rate of inflation in the economy increases sharply and unexpectedly, the likely consequence of such an increase in consumers and business, consequence of such an increase in consumers and business, basically looking at, like your effects of inflation. Now, we can quickly first, talk about what inflation is. Inflation is a general and sustained increase in price level. So that's one thing. We define inflation to determine and sustained increase in price level. Then we talk about the cost of inflation. Okay, so cost of inflation are many. We talk about them. We talk about menu costs, right? We talked about shoe leather cost. There is a cost of redistribution, right? I'm just writing them down and we just talk about them from consumers and from perspective. And then there was uncertainty, right? I apologize for the background noises. Uncertainty and balance of trade to get better. Why would balance of trade get better? And the rate of inflation in an economy increased sharply and unexpectedly, right? So guys, first, unexpected increase in inflation is basically an important thing to understand because they are talking about unanticipated inflation. right? So unanticipated inflation has a problem because people are not prepared for it. So you need to talk about the idea that if inflation is unexpected and sharp, then basically there's a large redistribution cost for which no one is prepared for. And as a result of that, consumers do suffer because what happens is that they may find sharp increase in prices and they may not be able to switch very quickly, and they may end up paying a large price. So consumers may end up suffering. Firms may also find that inputs to become expensive and may not be able to switch quickly as well. So there is that kind of redistribution cost where consumers and firms may not be able to control the cost of prices that we see, right? In terms of menu cost, so it's a firm cost because the menu is to be devised, and if they're unable to do so in time, they may lose out. Shoe leather cost is basically finding lower prices. From the firm perspective, lower prices. Uh, what's the first cost, Ritu? Amal, what do you mean by the menu cost? Menu cost, shoe leather cost, redistribution cost, uncertainty, and then the expenditure. No, but yeah, don't write about ER here. Talk about the factors. Uh, so, guys, the idea of and try to make sure that the discussions around uncertainty, unexpected nature of inflation, the sharp nature of inflation, right? So to make you end up preparing for inflation that easily. Make sense? Got it? Are we good? That's a very good point, Manam. You're talking about how consumers will behave in the short run, buying with the fear of more inflation. Exactly, that's the way that can happen. So consumers may react in a different manner. They may end up either uh, buying too much because they may feel price may rise more in the future. But the idea goes is that they are neither the consumer nor the firms are prepared well, and therefore there is a redistribution cost where they may end up suffering more, right? So talk about those things. Um, Remember, guys, from a answer perspective, if you are talking about from this cost perspective, you will be more organized, right? So menu costs, shoe leather costs, redistribution costs, uncertainty for farms and consumers, and their banana point of buying too much too quickly or not have enough is a problem. Okay, are you good? So keep these points in mind when you're writing answer. Cost of borrowing will increase. Yeah, whenever the interest rates are going, whenever the inflation is going up, uh, it becomes cost of borrowing does go up. Uh, no, but the more important point of who loses a borrower or lender, guys. In inflation, who loses out, borrower or lender? Anyone? The, Jamal, why would the borrower lose out? Yes, the lender loses out. Why? Because he's giving you a loan for 5%. Then when you return him, the real value of that loan might not be 5%. Will be lender does lose out. Yeah, real value is going down for him. Your purchasing power is going down also, guys. Remember, from a consumer perspective, his purchasing power is also going down. So talk about that as an effect. So unless firms are able to increase their prices, this may not happen. Okay, so all of these are the factors you need to write. So purchasing power is going down, so the menu cost becomes a problem. Shoe leather cost becomes a problem. This is basically search cost because it's sharp and unexpected. People may not be able to find subsidy very quickly. Redistribution cost is basically how firms and consumers first of all find their purchasing power to go down, and therefore uh, they may suffer. If firms are able to increase the price, they are the losers, firms will be winners. But if firms are unable to sort of increase price, then consumers can become better off. Similarly, if firms have borrowed money, they may not lose out too much. They may benefit, but if because lenders may lose out in this case, guys. Lastly, there's uncertainty for both consumers and producers. Minal's point, which is buying too much quickly, might happen. And I might not want to go net exports perspective right now. Okay, discuss whether substantial rise in interest rate is the best way to correct the increased rate of inflation. So basically, this is about a policy question. So talk about how when the interest rates go up, you're looking at basically a monetary policy at work, right? And what are you doing with this monetary policy? Guys, when the interest rates are going up, you are trying to basically make sure the two things happen. So when the interest rates are going up, the cost of borrowing will go up. Also, incentive to save will go up, causing a consumption to fall. And investment to fall. And as a result, you will see AD to fall. And the fall of AD will continue to lower, a little bit to lower prices, right? So that's the idea that we're going to try and what we call contractionary monetary policy to form. Now we talk about what are the basically advantages and disadvantages of this approach, and then we talk about other policies that can be used. So, guys, what are the pros and cons of this? This is where we go back to our discussion about monetary policy. So, if you look at AD, AS, AD will go down. Fall of AD is a way to go forward. However, there are challenges that can happen. Well, number one, GDP falls, right? Number two, unemployment may go up. So you may end up causing, although prices to go down, but GDP and unemployment to go up, to GDP to go down and unemployment to go up. So that's another point to remember. Right, guys? Anyone else? What else can we write here? What are the other challenges? So guys, between fiscal policy and monetary policy, we could talk about that, but first let's talk about focus on monetary policy only. Any other advantage? Any advantage that can come to our mind? The advantage, remember, I talked about this in our class also. There are some advantages that happen when you're looking at monetary policy as compared to, let's say, fiscal policy. So monetary policy, very good job, Ibrahim. Monetary policy may not be useful when you have a fixed exchange rate, because in a fixed exchange rate regime, interest rates are used to manage the exchange rate. Number one. Number two, between fiscal policy and monetary policy, one advantage you can see of fiscal policy is that monetary policy is that fiscal policy using contractionary fiscal policy is very unpopular as compared to using expansionary as compared to using monetary policy. So fiscal policy, where the government cut down the spending or increase taxes, it can result in becoming deeply unpopular. Make sense? So you talk about that, which means it's an advantage for monetary policy to be used. But the monetary policy has its own set of issues. Number one, you can see it is restricting GDP. It is causing the price level to go down. It may not be very useful when you have a fixed exchange rate regime. What else can we write, guys? Any other point that can come to your mind? So another point that come to my mind is also the idea that monetary policy is very quick to respond as compared to, let's say, fiscal policy, which is politically motivated, or supply side policies, which happen only in the long run. So you talk about that as an advantage as well. Then we talk about another policy that can be used. So you talk about another policy that can be used is supply side policies. So a supply side policy is a policy where you're trying to basically increase aggregate supply. The only problem is that it can happen only in the long run, and secondly, it is expensive. However, the advantage of it is that it gives you a long-term benefit, which these demand side policies do not provide. Makes sense? So you can talk about this that uh, in your answer. Now, a conclusion that I may want to write is just that uh, while supply side policy, while demand side policy could be useful in the short run, it has its downside. But if your goal is to fix the problem in the long run, supply side policies is a way to go forward, which can have a long-term impact. Uh, you can not mention supply side policy if you want to, but I would love to mention supply side policy because that supply side policy gives us a good sort of uh, analysis of things. No, Madhya, this is more of a policy question. This is a policy question. Supply side policy is not far-fetched at all, because it is whenever when you go back to your notes, we talked about policies to correct inflation. This is policies to correct inflation. So demand side policies and supply side policies come to our mind. Now, there is another thing that you can write here, which is I something which I forgot to mention. If there's a substantial rise in interest rates, and let's say it's because of cost push inflation, right? Right? What if the reason is because AS is going down and over and above you make AD fall? That is going to be very, very detrimental because you try to fix the cost push inflation through demand side sort of policy, which would mean you will end up causing significant recession to happen in the economy. The GDP will keep on sliding. So you need to make sure you know the cause of inflation before you decide which policy you need to adopt. You know, you can talk about that point as well. Because if it's cost push inflation, maybe demand side policy may not be desirable. Make sense, guys? Are we good? But don't you think for developing nations, due to lack of state capital, supply side policies are a bit far-fetched? I'm sorry, I didn't read this properly. No, not at all, Manam. Supply side policies are the way to go forward. The problem is, yes, developing countries do not have the money. So, what should we do when the developing countries don't have money? It's still, like if they raise sort of debt, and if they invest it in supply side, they will be better off than if they put that in meeting their, like fiscal or other deficits. Okay. Anyways, sorry, I saw Manam. I thought Madhya wrote that, and no, it's Manam who wrote that comment. Okay, guys, let me move on to the last question. Okay, quickly. Explain why the theory of comparative advantage may not give a true account of the benefits of free trade. May not give a true account of the benefits. So, guys, what is comparative advantage? Comparative advantage theory says whichever country has a lower opportunity cost, where should be producing a product and specialize in that product, and any surplus they can then trade with another country, right? So this is our definition of comparative advantage. So first we talk about what is comparative advantage and how it leads to specialization and trade. But then there is a discussion that we have in our notes, which is limitation of comparative advantage, or what are the assumptions that we have for comparative advantage, right? If you go back to our notes, we talked about, let me just quickly get them for you guys so we know what we're talking about. 1 minute, guys. Yeah, let me bring it out so we can discuss this. So some of the problems of comparative advantage theory. So we define what comparative advantage is, which is basically lower opportunity cost in the production of a good. You need to give up fewer resources. Talk about then some of the problems or limitations of comparative advantage, such as it assumes constant opportunity cost, but in reality, uh, the factor mobility is not perfect. Very good, Madhya, which means that it should be concave to the origin. It only looks at two birds, which is also a problem. Perfect factor mobility is basically not possible. There is no transportation cost assumed. And then there is, we also assume that there is no trade barriers and therefore no trade protection happening, which is not possible in real world. So these are the limitations you need to talk about, and why, and that's explains why it may not be a completely. It's not a complete justification of why countries end up trading due to competitive advantage. So for these reasons and others, the actual pattern of trade flows does not fully reflect comparative advantage. Still, you can write this also in your answer. Still, comparative advantage is a most useful or is a very useful concept in understanding and explaining much of what is going on in the world of trade. Okay, so that's your answer for this one. B part says, guys, discuss whether the let me just pause this. Discuss whether the US and China could benefit from the position of tariffs. So basically, pros and cons of tariff is basically an argument of uh, free trade or not. So let's talk about that question. Discuss whether the US and China could benefit from the imposition of tariffs on goods such as uh, those identified. So, guys, so let's read this. In April 2018, the US government threatened to impose tariffs of 25% on a wide range of imports from China, including steel, technological products, medicine, and household goods such as washing machines. In turn, China threatened to retaliate with the same proposed tariffs on imports. So, guys, in this question, you need to first talk about what is a tariff, how does it work, right? So, how the tariff will work, it will basically make the good becoming more expensive. Let's say, you see the diagram. We will talk about this is demand and supply. If this is your world price, you will put a tariff like this, PW plus T, and it will result in the quantity will go from Q0 or Q0 minus Q1 to Q3 minus Q4. So lower imports will happen. Now, what are the benefits of tariff? Number one, it results in the domestic producers produce more, so employment will go up. Number two, there is a tariff revenue that the government can get. Then you talk about that a tariff can be justified on grounds of, like if China, for example, is trying to sort of dumping is taking place, right? So because here it is saying U.S. government is starting to impose tariff on a wide range of imports from China, and China is planning to retaliate as well. So the downside of this is, of course, that when you put a tariff, you don't allow free trade to happen, which can result in sort of inefficient producers to produce more, inefficient domestic producers to produce more. There are deadweight losses in terms of, if you look at this, area 1, 2, 3, and 4. Area 2 and 4 are deadweight losses that happen because producers who should not be producing to begin with, because they are inefficient, are producing more. right? Make sense? Any questions about this, guys? So here you can talk about the pros and cons of free trade versus why protection is justified and how tariff as a policy could be justified or could have also its downsides. Tariffs are tariffs worse for consumers? Well, I mean, what if US is producing these goods as well? You know, so we can write that in your conclusion, guys, or Manav. But from an economic perspective, tariff is bad because it doesn't allow free trade to happen, and the theory of comparative advantage is ignored. Make sense? Okay, guys, what's the conclusion here? So the conclusion here is whether both countries will benefit or not when you're putting a tariff, and the answer is eventually no, because countries when they start to protect sort of their domestic producers who are inefficient, it is only going to cause more deadweight losses, and the economy will suffer, and both countries may end up having trade ties to get affected. Trade unions, or I don't know why trade unions of China, US may retaliate, worsening trade for both countries. There is no discussion of trade union here. Workers may retaliate, firms may retaliate. Or trading firms, basically governments may respond to each other. So yeah, worsening trade for both countries. So in the long term, tariffs are not beneficial unless it's on the ground of dumping. Make sense? Unless the grounds of putting a tariff is dumping. Okay, guys? Just give me 1 minute. Guys, any other question? I'm going to end the class now. When is the next class? Tomorrow from 10 to 11. Okay, guys, tomorrow we have a 10 to 11 class to make up for one class that I missed. Okay, and we will do another paper and then we'll meet on Monday. 10 to 11 again on Monday. Okay, so for a few of these days, I'm trying to keep an early class because I won't be able to keep a class at 4 o'clock. Okay, guys, bye-bye. Sorry for all the background noises. I'll get back to you, Ryan. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.